The water sits there, a perfect, trembling dome in the corner where the tile meets the tub. It should have drained away minutes ago, but it clings to the grout line with a stubbornness that feels personal. You lean in, squinting through the steam, and you see it. A hairline fracture in the silicone, no wider than a human hair, yet deep enough to swallow a pint of water over a weekend. This is not a cosmetic flaw. This is an invitation. Behind that thin, rubbery seal lies a cavity of plywood subflooring that has been slowly turning into sponge for 3 years. You have been ignoring the smell of damp earth every time you shower. You have been stepping over the loose floorboard in the hallway without understanding why the wood feels soft under your heel. The leak is not coming from the faucet. It is not coming from the drain. It is coming from the silence between the tile and the tub, a gap that was sealed with a material chosen for convenience rather than competence. Why does this specific joint fail while the rest of the bathroom holds its ground? The answer lies in a misunderstanding of movement. Most people believe caulk is a glue, a static barrier that hardens and stays put. It is not. It is a joint sealer designed to stretch and compress as the house breathes, as the tub flexes under weight, as temperatures shift from freezing winters to humid summers. When you apply it incorrectly, or when you use the wrong type of sealant, you create a rigid skin over a moving target. That skin cracks. And once it cracks, the water finds a path of least resistance, slipping behind the vanity, rotting the studs, and hiding in the dark until the damage is structural. You are standing in front of this failure right now. The old caulk looks intact from a distance, a neat white line against the beige tile. But up close, it is peeling away from the tub's lip like dead skin. Your instinct is to buy a new tube from the hardware store and run it straight over the top. Do not do that. That is how you waste money and delay the inevitable. The problem is not the new caulk. The problem is the surface beneath it. Any new bead applied over this old, failing layer will inherit its weaknesses. It will bond to dust, to mildew spores, to the residue of old adhesive that no one bothered to remove. It will sit there, looking perfect, while the water continues its slow erosion behind it. You need to understand what is actually holding that old strip in place, and more importantly, what is trying to pry it off. The battle for this seal is not fought with the new tube. It is fought with the scraper, the solvent, and the patience to strip everything back to bare, clean surfaces. If you skip this step, you are not repairing. You are decorating a disaster. The next phase requires you to destroy what is already there, even if it still looks functional. You pull at that rubbery strip of beige silicone, expecting it to stretch like a clean seal, but instead, it snaps with a wet, tearing sound. Underneath, the wall is not dry. It is a sponge. The water you've been watching trickle down the side of the tub for months hasn't been leaking out. It has been sinking in, trapped behind the very material you thought was protecting your home. This is the hidden architecture of rot. Most homeowners assume that if the caulk is still adhering to the tile and the tub, the job is done. That assumption is costing you thousands. The problem isn't just the silicone failing. It's what the silicone allows to happen while it holds on tight. When you apply fresh caulk over old, dirty, or slightly compromised sealant, you aren't creating a barrier. You are creating a pocket. Water enters through microscopic hairline cracks in the new layer, or worse, it seeps around the edges where the adhesion is imperfect. Once inside, that water has nowhere to go. It sits against the backer board or the mortar bed, creating a dark, damp sanctuary for mold spores that have been waiting there since the last renovation. Here is the complication that changes everything: the smell. If you lean in close to the tub after a hot shower, you might detect a faint, earthy odor. You probably blame the humidity, but that is the scent of cellulose breaking down. Drywall and wood studs do not rot quickly in air, they rot slowly in stagnant moisture. The silicone acts as a vapor barrier in reverse, trapping liquid water against porous materials while preventing evaporation. The result is a slow-motion demolition of your bathroom's structural integrity. Consider the specific chemistry at play here. Standard acrylic latex caulk shrinks as it cures, pulling away from the substrate by fractions of a millimeter. These gaps are invisible to the naked eye, but wide enough for capillary action to pull water deep into the grout lines and behind the tile. Once that water reaches the subfloor, it doesn't stop. It travels horizontally, seeking the path of least resistance, often ending up in the floor joists above your neighbor's ceiling. By the time you see the damage, it is no longer a bathtub issue. It is a structural one. This is why the old sealant must go. Not because it looks ugly, but because it is a lie. It presents an appearance of waterproofing while actively facilitating decay. You need to strip every millimeter of that old material. Use a utility knife to score the top edge, then pull. If it resists, use a caulk removal tool or a specialized solvent. But do not scrape so hard that you gouge the porcelain or chip the tile. The goal is to expose the raw, solid surface beneath, not to destroy the fixtures. When you finally clear the joint, you will see the truth. Dark stains, black spots, soft, spongy grout. That is the evidence. That is the reason you are here. But before you can apply anything new, you must address what lies beneath the surface. Because if you skip this step, you are simply repainting the walls of a burning house. The next phase requires you to inspect the substrate, to probe for softness, and to make the hard decision about whether your bathroom is salvageable or if it needs to be opened up completely. You are staring at a wall that looks solid but feels like wet cardboard. That softness is not just damage. It is evidence of a slow-motion crime scene playing out behind your drywall. The water did not arrive in a flood. It arrived in drops, invisible seeps through the seam between the tub and the tile, traveling along the studs until they reached the paper facing of the gypsum board. Now you have to extract that rot without turning a manageable repair into a structural demolition project. This requires a level of precision that most DIYers skip, opting instead for a hammer and a prayer. If you swing too hard, you will shatter the surrounding tile, creating a crack that lets moisture back in within 6 months. You need to cut a clean, vertical incision along the edge of the damaged area. Use a utility knife with a fresh blade, scoring deep enough to sever the drywall paper, but shallow enough to leave the wood stud intact beneath. This is where the first contradiction to common advice appears. Most tutorials tell you to pry out the rotted section immediately. Do not do that. The drywall, even when soft, still provides temporary structural support for the tiles on either side. If you remove it prematurely, the weight of the ceramic can cause the adjacent grout lines to crack under tension. Instead, you must stabilize the perimeter. Take a thin metal ruler or a stiff piece of plastic and slide it behind the drywall, acting as a brace. Once you have that internal support in place, you can carefully cut away the compromised material. You are looking for a clean edge of firm, dry wood or undamaged drywall. If you hit soft spots that extend more than 2 inches deeper than expected, stop. That is your signal that the water has traveled further than the surface shows. Here is the complication that changes everything. You might find that the rot is not in the wall, but in the tub flange itself. Many homeowners assume the issue is purely cosmetic, but if the metal flange that connects the tub to the drain pipe has corroded, no amount of drywall patching will stop the leak. You need to check this by inserting a thin wire probe into the gap between the tub skirt and the floor. If you feel resistance or hear a hollow clink, the seal is broken. This discovery shifts the stakes from a simple cosmetic fix to a plumbing intervention. You cannot simply cover up a broken flange with new caulk. The water will find its way back to the source, inevitably. So, before you buy any patching compound, you must determine if the leak is coming from above, the shower head or faucet, or below, the drain connection. If it is below, you need to access the plumbing from the basement or crawl space. If that is not possible, you may need to remove the entire tub. This is the moment where the easy path diverges from the correct one. The temptation to just glue over the hole is strong, especially when you have already invested hours in cutting and prying. But remember, caulk is not a waterproofing membrane. It is a flexible sealant designed to bridge gaps, not to hold back hydrostatic pressure. If the source of the water is still active, your new caulk will fail, and you will be doing this all over again in a year. You need to ensure the source is dead before you proceed. This means running the shower and checking for drips, inspecting the supply lines, and verifying the drain trap is secure. Only when the house is dry can you begin the reconstruction. And reconstruction is not just about filling holes. It is about creating a barrier that can withstand the thermal expansion and contraction of daily life. The next step is not about patching, it is about preparation. You need to understand why standard joint compound fails in bathrooms, and how to create a surface that will actually bond with silicone. This is where the real work begins, and where most people make the mistake that guarantees future failure. You have the silicone loaded. You have the bead laid down in a continuous, unbroken line that looks promising from 3 feet away. But look closer. Look at the edge where the white caulk meets the porcelain. It is jagged. It is uneven. It catches the light like a bad haircut. This is the moment that separates a professional finish from a DIY disaster. The difference between water staying out and mold growing in is not the quality of the silicone you squeezed out. It is the geometry of the tool you use to shape it. Most people grab a finger. Do not do this. Your finger is too wide, too warm, and too unpredictable. It smears the material rather than compressing it, leaving behind a porous surface that traps dirt and grime immediately. Instead, you need a tool with a specific radius, something that matches the concave curve of your bathtub's edge. A simple plastic finishing tool, or even a smooth, wet spoon handle, works if you hold it at a 45-degree angle. But here is the complication. The angle matters more than the tool itself. If you approach the bead vertically, you create a flat edge that sheds water poorly. Water pools on top, sits there for hours, and eventually seeps under the capillary action. You must tilt the tool so it presses the silicone into the joint, not just across it. This creates a concave bead that directs water straight down into the drain, not along the seam. Now, pay attention to pressure. You are not painting a wall. You are extruding a thick, viscous polymer that resists movement. If you pull the tool too fast, the silicone snaps back, creating tiny air pockets invisible to the naked eye, but fatal to the seal. These pockets become entry points for moisture within 6 months. You need to move with slow, deliberate consistency. Think of it as smoothing butter onto toast, but with the weight of a brick. Start at one end, keeping the tool fully submerged in the wet silicone, and drag it toward you in one continuous motion. Do not stop. Do not lift. If you hesitate, you leave a ridge.